Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 393. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. It is Thursday, December 11th. Only Thursday. And still cold as hell here in New York City. I'm coming to you live from New York City, USA. It is still really cold here. I just got back from a field trip with my first grader and his class, and it was a challenge. But they are motivated, like so many others, that it is only 14 days till Christmas. And coming up today in just a minute, our guest is like an early Christmas present of knowledge. The great Scott MacFarlane, CBS Justice Correspondent, is going to come up and give us the download on a number of top issues. He's all over it, kind of like the NORAD tracker on Santa. But first, a ton happening in the news that I got to get you up to speed on. Maybe most importantly, especially for the national security and defense world, Trump has seized a Venezuelan oil tanker. If you haven't seen the news, it happened yesterday. Special operators dropped in on a helicopter and took over what Trump is calling the biggest oil tanker ever seized. A significant escalation, definitely not helping oil prices or the speculation that Trump wants the oil in Venezuela. A reminder, Congress hasn't approved war. Most of the country is against it. But this is another example, in my view, of Trump being all gas and no brakes. And we still might have a land war in time for Christmas. Also of note, see, we don't have to blow up every boat. You can take boats without blowing them up, and you can probably get a ton of intelligence information. Nevertheless, a significant escalation, especially because they released a video of this. The question is, will they release the videos of the strike on September 7th and other strikes that have happened before? Will Congress step up? And in the last week they have, with just over 6 days in session before they go into the holidays, or will they get rolled by Trump on this? I still think the most important story in the world is that Trump can do whatever he wants with the most powerful military the world has ever seen, and nothing is stopping him. He's all gas, no brakes. Related, we're going to talk to Scott about this in just a second, but a bipartisan group of former federal ethics officials is asking for an internal Justice Department investigation into the legal opinion justifying the U.S. military strikes on suspected drug running boats. This is a long and evolving conversation in America about whether or not these strikes are illegal. Admiral Bradley is in the crosshairs. Hegseth has said it was his decision. He has said it's his decision. And now I think all eyes are going to be on Admiral Bradley in the days to come. More with Scott on that. Also in defense news, the House has passed a $900 billion defense bill. I'll dig into that in the days to come, but that's almost $1 trillion defense bill that is now on its way to the president's desk. Also, maybe a bit below the radar, but it shouldn't be. The Navy has now submitted its report recommendations on Senator Kelly to the Pentagon's Office of General Counsel, where they're providing a legal review and input. Zach Cohen over at CNN has been reporting on this. It's important, and it's happening today, and I continue to think it's outrageous. I think Kelly did nothing that warrants this kind of dangerous, ridiculous, un-American, and overtly political persecution, but we're going to stay on top of it. I hope Senator Kelly will be back on this show soon. A related reminder, Admiral Halsey, the Southcom commander, retires tomorrow. Will we hear from him? We will find out. Sticking with Venezuela, Nobel Peace Prize winner Machado has vowed to end Maduro's rule in Venezuela. Maria Corina Machado has reappeared on the stage. She was smuggled out of her country and appeared yesterday in Europe, ramping up the pressure on Maduro. Been no strikes on any tankers or anything else so far today. We'll see, that may change. So as of December 5th, we have at least 87 people killed in 22 strikes and counting. I think if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. Related to National Guard deployments, a really big piece of news that has also been below the radar, I think, for too many Americans. A federal judge yesterday blocked President Trump's deployment of National Guard troops to Los Angeles and ordered them to return under the control of the state's governor, who is Governor Gavin Newsom, who I also hope will join us on this show soon. Newsom said in a statement, today's ruling is abundantly clear. The federalization of National Guard in California is illegal and must end. We will find out if the president will heed that ruling, or if he'll try to continue to go full bore, if he'll try to appeal. We had Governor Wes Moore on earlier this week, and we asked him about that. Tomorrow, we will have Governor-elect of New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill. I will ask her how she plans to handle National Guard deployments and possible federalizations in her state. But it's a very big deal, and I think continues to push the boundaries of what a president has done with the military. In other parts of the world, in Ukraine, it is day 1382 of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. There were major drone attacks by the armed forces of Ukraine on Moscow and Western Russia yesterday. In politics, Mike Lindell, the My Pillow founder, has announced he will be running for Minnesota governor. He's obviously a close ally of Trump. And now his Lindell TV is in the Pentagon propaganda press corps. Folks like CBS and CNN and Fox are out, and Mike Lindell's TV network is in there, and he's now taken it to the next level and announcing he's running for governor. In culture, an important one. Former Navy SEAL Johnny Kim is home from space. He spent 245 days aboard the International Space Station, the conclusion of Expedition 73. He is an inspiring and incredible guy. He got home yesterday and was greeted with pride and celebration. I hope we'll get him on this show. In culture, fast food chain In-N-Out is retiring the number 67 from its ticket system following continued disruptions by kids swarming the restaurant and filming employees every time they announce 67. My kids think this is outrageous. In-N-Out thinks it's the right thing to do. In sports, no shortage of news. Michigan has fired their coach, Sharon Moore, who has also been arrested in a scandal that is overtaking college football. That will continue to evolve. Less scandalous and interestingly, nonetheless, the Indianapolis Colts have signed 44-year-old QB Phillip Rivers. He hasn't played in 4 years. He's going to replace Daniel Jones, who was on a tear, who blew out his Achilles. And I'm rooting for him as an old man. But also, I think the Indianapolis Colts should be the team of independent Americans. So anything Indy, we're going to be rooting for it, and we're rooting for Phil Rivers. Mets fans are crushed because first baseman Pete Alonso is leaving the Mets. He signed a massive 5-year deal, not with the Yankees like I was hoping for, but with the Baltimore Orioles. Our friend Wes Moore got an interesting and early Christmas present there, and it is still Army-Navy week. It's happening in just 2 days in Baltimore, but there's a lot happening across the country, and now is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. And helping us stay vigilant, a returning guest, a person that I am always thankful to talk to because I think he's one of the most effective, tenacious, relentless reporters in America. He covers stuff that we care about and all Americans should care about, from the evolving legal battles to January 6th. He's finally back on the show. The great and powerful Scott MacFarlane is back. Welcome back, sir.
This is nice. Thanks for having me, Paul.
This is nice, huh?
Good to see your friendly face, your friendly voice, talk about important stuff.
Well, it's great to talk to you, man. I know you're a struggling Eagles fan. That's not been so nice this year for you and your guys. Hurts threw 4 interceptions the other day, huh?
And he fumbled the ball, and he turned the ball over twice on the same play, which I never thought I'd see in my life. The last few weeks have been like the sports equivalent of getting a root canal, just watching the process play out. But there's time left.
Watching Jalen Hurts fumble twice on the same play has been like watching Pete Hegseth on these investigations. I know you can't go there, but I'm going to. We're going to dig into that in a couple of minutes. But let me ask you, sir, you're out there everywhere. You're deep in the middle of it. Where are you and how are you?
Doing good here in Washington. It's like a kinetic energy that never stops. There is no such thing as a traditional Saturday or Sunday anymore, or a nighttime. If you're trying to cover the administration, those who support it, those who oppose the administration, I think agree that it is a constant source of news. It's a constant source of information, and we have to just try to keep up with it. And it's a new rhythm we're all still adjusting to.
You do a good job of it. Let me ask you this. This is maybe good lessons for folks, whether they work in the news business and maybe especially if they don't. How do you do it? How do you prioritize? How do you attack your day as a leader to continue to have success, break stories, and stay on top of what I think are some of the most important stories? How do you do it, Scott?
All of it is triage, and that's always the case for journalists. It's always a matter of picking and trying to figure out what's the most emergent and the most important issue of the moment, and trying to figure out from there what's secondary, what's tertiary. And that's a rhythm we all get adjusted to. This is quite different. This is trying to figure out what needs to be reported on today, what's the most impactful on people's lives, what's actually going to impact their quality of life or what they see happening, what's truly a shattering of a norm versus a tinkering with the norm. I think we're all figuring it out as we go. But that's why a lot of us came to Washington, was to watchdog the government. And it's a prime moment to do just that.
Well, it's never been more important than now, absolutely. And I think that leads us right into what I think is our top topic. You've been covering stuff, I think, with a focus that's a testament to your leadership. We're going to get to January 6th in a bit, but now with these legal debates, you're the justice expert and doing this investigative reporting. It feels like now the target is moving down toward Admiral Bradley. Pete Hegseth was under scrutiny, will continue to be under scrutiny, but now there's the question of Admiral Bradley making the call. He seems willing to own the call in a way that perhaps Hegseth isn't. We had Jason Dempsey on the show recently, and he said there are no scapegoats here. Everybody is going to be held accountable or should be held accountable across the chain of command. But can you tell us about your latest reporting? And it kind of feels like a weird political game of pin the tail on the donkey. And at least for this news cycle, it feels like now the tail has been pinned on Bradley.
Isn't this just one of those things that you didn't envision you'd be thinking about, talking about, or worried about a month ago? And that speaks to the moment we're in, where you don't really know exactly what you're going to be trying to drill down on in a few weeks. But the vantage point I have is whatever authorization there is for the actions on these boats, some of it came through the Department of Justice. There was some type of guidance or memo or legal analysis that was issued in advance of this. And the administration hasn't put that out there for everybody to read. And there may be reasons you don't put that type of thing out there, but it's going to raise questions, isn't it? About the legality of this. It's going to raise questions about what type of authorization or guidance was given. And so now you have this group of former ethics officials, those who served under President Obama, those who served under President George W. Bush, who are joining the congressional requests, including from the Senate Judiciary Committee, for some of that information to be made public. If for no other reason, there's so many questions being asked, not ascribing any motive to or predicting what's actually in this Department of Justice legal guidance. But clearly there's a public interest in getting this out there. So I think until there's more transparency on that front, if there can be transparency on that front, we're going to have all this simmering and brewing indefinitely.
So, Scott, what's the justification here? Because I could understand why you don't want to release, a video normally, right? You don't want to release operational security. Why would they not release legal guidance that provides, frankly, for not just someone like Admiral Bradley, but for an E5 or an O1 or 2 who's maybe somewhere in the chain of command who actually pulled the trigger on a missile or pulls the trigger on a drone? What's their justification for not putting the legal justification out in public?
I think further infusing this with opacity, further fusing this with mystery is the Department of Justice isn't saying, here's why we can't, here's why we won't, here's when we will, here's why we will. They're not answering our questions about it, but they're also not directly declaratively speaking to the people who've asked, from the Senate Judiciary Committee, from these ethics groups, from Democracy Defenders Fund. And all of that just fans flames. And I think you're seeing versions of that elsewhere, where you can declaratively speak to a question, even if it's a question from a critic, even if it's a question from a journalist, even if it's a question you didn't expect, and at least tamp down the fires. So where have we seen versions of this before, Paul? Well, obviously, we saw some variant of this with the Epstein files, where the lack of release or the lack of straight answers from certain parties fueled questions. Now they fueled so many questions, they had to pass a law, and the president signed it to release the Epstein files. We're seeing it, and I'm noting it in recent days in the Capitol Hill pipe bomb case. It was a week ago. They arrested a Virginia man for those January 5th pipe bombs, that blockbuster whodunit. They arrested a man who didn't speak to motive. He didn't say why he allegedly did it. They didn't say if there's any connection between those pipe bombs and January 6th in the U.S. Capitol insurrection that we all witnessed. And the lack of information about that is going to fuel conspiracy theories or criticisms or questions about whether there's somebody else involved. Is that all you have? What's the evidence? Sometimes if you give out more information, you at least tamp down the questions and you tamp down the theories.
Scott, is it a strategy? I mean, if you look at January 6th, look at Epstein, look at Venezuela, is the strategy to say no, no, no until they have to, then say yes and just not do it and kind of wear you out and hope you give up, or that you and other reporters, and maybe more importantly, that Congress and the country kind of can't handle the flooding of the zone, where Trump can say, yeah, we'll release the tape. And he'll say that for a couple of days. Then he turns around and says, no, I won't release the tape. I never said that. Is it a switcheroo? Is it a strategy to just wear you out and kind of distract the country until something else happens, like strikes on Venezuela, and everybody forgets about it, like they have for the most part with Signalgate?
I get similar questions from people who come up to me. I get similar questions inside some people in my social circle. It's a really good question. And I don't want to ascribe motives to the administration or to the Department of Justice, because I don't really have a good read on it. Here's what I can tell you unequivocally, Paul. You know this as well as anybody else. There's a recognition from newsmakers at this moment that they can silo information to different audiences. And they can, if they choose, ignore certain subsets of audiences. You're a newsmaker and you want to reach your political allied constituents. You could do so through different independent media, different cable media, different singular reporters. And you could say, I don't need to talk to the rest of you. I can ignore you because you're not speaking to a large number of my politically aligned constituents. And that's not true just of Republicans or Democrats. It's true of all kinds of newsmakers out of politics, too. They could choose judiciously who they give information to and ignore everybody else. Still get messages to the people they care to reach. And I think one thing I noted from the last few major events that have gone through the Department of Justice, which I cover, is the big stakeholders, the Attorney General, the FBI Director, the FBI Deputy Director, have all gone on Fox News and spoken about big things that we can't get answers to. That's a communication strategy. I'm not going to judge it as good or bad, but it's noteworthy. What that speaks, I think, to the public is there are certain people we want to communicate with one-on-one, and there are certain audiences we're not going to respond to. And make of that what you will.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how Trump in particular responds to CBS. He's traditionally, shat on 60 Minutes, but that's always been a force of nature. There's Dan Lamothe, I hope will come back on, who covers defense. There are some good reporters and good platforms at CBS that, I haven't seen him overtly shit on CBS lately in the same way he does on other networks. I mean, has he ever attacked you or your reporting personally, or have any in the administration attacked you or your agency specifically?
We get a lot of feedback unsolicited from a lot of people. I've heard nothing singular from anybody in the administration about my reporting or about me. I think the better way to measure that is how often you get called upon when there's a chance to ask a question. I think that's the best read on things. Are you given the opportunity to ask questions on behalf of your constituents, your viewers, your listeners, your audience? That's the best way to measure, I think, how public figures, do they give them an opportunity to ask or have their say? It's those who get boxed out, those who can't speak, those who can't question, those who can't get a call returned. I think that speaks to the treatment of media by newsmakers, not just political ones.
Scott, can I ask you for your thoughts on the changeover at the Pentagon here? We've had a lot of different journalists on here who've reacted, who've been a part of the groups. We had Tom Bowman on. We've had Dan Lamothe has been on. Sorry, I said Lamothe. I meant James Laporta at CBS. I hope James will be back on soon. But now we've got, you guys are out, Fox is out, NPR is out, and, the My Pillow guy and Laura Loomer are in there. Your reactions as maybe one of the most, respective and effective journalists around national security and defense?
Well, I can still go in to my office at the Department of Justice. My Pentagon colleagues can't. So there's an asymmetrical thing going on there. But it doesn't mean my best sourcing's inside the building. It doesn't mean their best sourcing's inside the building. And I'll note that I've noticed over the last few weeks, you've obviously noted it too, some of the most transcendent and dynamic and impactful reporting on the Pentagon has happened, but from people who aren't there. I don't know the real world effect. I've never been a Pentagon correspondent, but I do know if I had to surrender my chair that I'm blessed to have inside the Department of Justice. I had one inside the Capitol. When I fill in, I have one inside the White House. Gives you some ability to have some access and do some of your job, but it doesn't preclude you from doing a great job if you're not allowed inside. But I'm going to flip the question. I want to flip the question to you because you know this better than me. What did you make of that press conference the Pentagon staged for the new press corps last week. Is there any efficacy to that? Does it have any
No, I mean,
benefit to the Pentagon?
if it is, it only normalizes them. And I think the most important point to understand is that is not a press corps, that's a propaganda corps, right? And it's something we've seen from North Korea and from Putin and from others. It was deeply un-American. And what I really am concerned about is I think the traditional Pentagon press corps has continued to report well. We've covered that on this show at length, and we will continue to. But what I caution and I would ask you is that a model for what's to come next at Justice or at other places, right? I mean, if I am them and I'm on plan, I've said this long before, everything they're doing at the Pentagon is what they want to do in other places later. So if it's worked for them to eliminate the Pentagon press corps, replace them with propagandists, I would say do the same thing at VA, do the same thing at Justice. Do you have any reason to believe that might be coming next for you guys at Justice?
Had nothing but cordial responses from the Department of Justice staff, political and career. Would be unambiguous about that. Nothing but cordial, and are responsive to inquiries when I send them. I think I would make the argument if this was a journalism class and I was talking to young students, don't worry about whether you're in the building or not. Don't worry about that. Worry about where your sourcing is. And my general observation outside of my particular job is if people who have information, people who have scoops, people who are sources, see you being marginalized by the sports team, by the government agency, by the politician, those sources will find you and help you out and give you tips because they want their former colleagues, their former team, their former party to be held accountable. So when you kick everybody out of a press room, the people who have information notice. And it may just be the best thing to trigger tips and best thing to trigger sourcing. I'm not surprised those who were kicked out of the Pentagon may have some of the most dynamic high traction reporting.
I hope you're right for the sake of our Pentagon and the sake of our troops. Let's go below the radar on a topic that has not been below the radar for you or for us, but for many Americans. I mean, I'm constantly retweeting and resharing information you have had over the years, all the way back to COVID and when it first happened, around the investigations around January 6th. Can I ask you to summarize for folks? You know, January 6th, the suspect has been arrested. Can you tell us what we know, what happens next? And can you give us an overview of the broader picture? How many January 6th suspects are still out there? And what's the status of that ongoing investigation?
At this point, Paul, there are two different cases at this point. The January 5th pipe bomb case, just broken after a 5-year mystery story was written, is a 30-year-old from Woodbridge, Virginia, about 20 miles outside of Washington, D.C. And if you've been around Washington, D.C., or 20 miles outside of Washington, D.C. is like an hour and a half away. It's a lifetime away. But he's somebody who, according to the charging document, an 8-page charging document, had some type of cell phone connection to that neighborhood where the pipe bombs were that night, and allegedly had purchased some items from a hardware store that are similar to the components found in the pipe bomb, piping, not gunpowder or explosive material, but some of the hardware that would be in there. He's being held in jail pending a detention hearing later this month. Hasn't had a chance to say his piece, but there's very little in the charging document for now, and there's no ascribed motive so far that's been alleged, and there's no connection that's been drawn or separation that's been drawn between those bombs and January 6th. The reason that whole story is interesting in the first place, the reason why this has been top of mind and was a high-level FBI investigation, Paul, is because it happened a few hours before the insurrectionists arrived and tore through the Capitol, and police had said, declaratively, that those pipe bombs detoured, derailed, and distracted the officers just as some of the rioters were approaching, making the Capitol more vulnerable. It was a force multiplier for the riot. That case is pending, and there is an appetite for more information, just so people can be satisfied whether or not there was a connection to January 6th. As for January 6th, well, you've got 1,500 people who got clemency at the same moment on Inauguration Day 2025. Those who were in jail were freed within hours. Those who still had to go to trial, those whose cases had not yet been decided, cases were dismissed. Those who had been since released from jail were absolved of their restitution, of having to pay back to taxpayers for all the money that was owed, or were separated from their probation or their supervised release. Everybody absolved nearly all of them with pardons. Some of the higher level seditious conspiracy defendants were given clemency, commutations. They still want their full pardons for several reasons. The largest criminal investigation in American history evaporated like that. No new cases being pursued. There were many, many defendants still being sought for their roles in the Capitol riot. Investigation ended. The Department of Justice's online database, web pages dedicated to this one-of-a-kind prosecution have been erased. They're gone. I think the more fundamental issue we face right now, Paul, is the concern that history is being whitewashed. Not only have the cases been eliminated, but there's fear that the history is trying to be eliminated. And that means something to the victims, to the police who were beaten with poles, sticks, who had to face rioters who sprayed bear spray, raid WD-40, who carried knives, who carried guns, who carried brass knuckles, axes, and tomahawks. For the police who suffered through that, for the Capitol staffers who were barricaded behind doors as the rioters were moving through the Capitol. It's hard to watch the history get rewritten, but there's a fear that's happening.
We have to remind people, like that of how outrageous that attack was and how expansive the investigation was and how unprecedented this blanket pardon is. I mean, this is like what Saddam does. I mean, I can't even think of an American parallel. I don't know if you can, but let me ask you this. Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, two of the most political actors we've ever seen. They, emerged with this suspect for the January 5th bombings. If they shut everything down and they cleansed the Justice Department and they weren't focused on it, how'd they catch this guy?
That's one of the questions that was asked by more than one reporter at the news conference in which the Department of Justice leadership announced the arrest. What was your break? What triggered? Was it a tip? There was a $500,000 reward for information related to the arrest. So was there a $500,000 person that now exists out there?
That reward was still active, even though everything else had been squashed. Yeah.
That's right. The reward for the pipe bomb, the pipe bomb investigation. I'll answer your question in a moment. But the pipe bomb investigation is the great unifier of January 6th, because no matter where you were on the political spectrum, you wanted the answer to that question. There were people who are deeply devoted supporters of the president who believed there'd be something nefarious with the pipe bomb to try to sabotage the president. There were opponents of the president, his critics, who wondered if the pipe bombs were put there to help the rioters get better access or somehow stop the electoral count on January 6th. And there's all kinds of people in between who just want to know the truth. What happened? This is a remarkable thing. Somebody put pipe bombs by the U.S. Capitol that could have been deadly, and we don't know who did it. And it's been 5 years. Are we all safe? So there's a lot of people who just want to get answers, who don't want to engage in theories. So this unified everybody. The investigation stayed open. A $500,000 reward was up there. And the FBI, under the leadership of Kash Patel and his predecessor, Chris Wray, which means the Trump administration and the Biden administration, tried to generate tips and amplify the need to find the person. That's the one thing was the great unifier. So what was the big break? That after 5 years allowed them to find their person. The answers were mushier when that question was asked. I think the FBI deputy director, Dan Bongino, made some reference to, we just put fresh eyes on it. We made this a priority. We drilled down on it. We really wanted to get after this. And there were allusions made that the prior employees at the FBI weren't doing so. I don't know if that is not supported by evidence, at least not yet. It's not been supported by any witness or member of the FBI who was there then or there now. That's the argument they made. And we'll find out through the course of the prosecution, through the course of trying to seek pretrial detention, which is not easy. Judges want to be convinced through the preparation for trial. If there's a trial, what was the thing that caused the breakthrough? But the fact that they haven't specified that yet, that gives rise to those theories and the conspiracies and the idea that, that something's not quite right here. And getting a bit more transparent, once they can answer that question, maybe in their interest to do so, to snuff out those fires.
So we don't know how they got him. We don't know if he has any affiliations to the Oath Keepers or Stuart Rhodes or anyone else. There have been some dribblings about his concern about the election being illegal or not being valid, right? But Scott, what's stopping Trump from stepping in and making this go away, right? Because if there is a trial, if there is, a continued public conversation that forces scrutiny back on January 6th and his unprecedented pardons, and I hope what the hell are these people doing now? Because you and others have reported that a number of them have been arrested, subsequently for additional crimes or other crimes. Is there anything within Trump's power to just make this go away?
Hey, the president has the power to end any federal prosecution in general, in principle. I mean, we saw that with the pardons he's issued so far this year. He ended prosecutions before they happened. He ended cases before they went to trial, which is an untraditional use of the pardon power to stop a case before it moves forward in the first place. And that was true with a whole bunch of January 6th investigations. The hundreds of people were pardoned before they even got to trial, whereas historically pardons tended to be used for people whose cases were closed and made remorse and paid down their debts and found some way of making the victims whole. So it could, but there's a different politics to this. And the president has not spoken directly to the pipe bomb arrest. He was asked about it, but didn't really give a direct answer because it wasn't really a direct question. His thoughts on this right now are unknown. But I want to emphasize again, Paul, politics on this are weird. The January 5th Capitol Hill pipe bomb case does not have any traditional politics to it. It's not like January 6th. There are people from all parts of the political world who want answers. And I don't know how clemency would apply in that type of political circumstance.
Let me just ask you one last question on this subject, if I can. Kash Patel has been under tremendous scrutiny. Many, including myself, have argued he's absolutely unqualified for this job. He's way in over his head. Do you think he survives much longer? I mean, if Hegseth wasn't getting so much heat, I feel like there would be more fire on Kash Patel. Tulsi Gabbard has been interestingly invisible for the last couple of months, but any internal reporting on it seems to be some pushback internally, always has been pushback on Kash Patel. Do you think he survives the next 3 months or so?
I mean, the speculation of somebody being on the way out is as old as some of the buildings in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I try not to pay too much mind to that type of thing, no matter who's in charge. And certainly we've heard that certain people are on the hot seat. The president's eager to fire somebody or eager to quit. That in different administrations for decades, and often as often as it's true, it's not true. Let me tell you what I know. What I know is this norm breaking of nudging out Chris Wray before his 10-year term was over, installing a loyalist in Kash Patel as FBI director, getting it through the Senate in confirmation. I wonder, and a lot of people I talk to inside the Bureau wonder, does that mean the FBI director is not really a 10-year position anymore? You don't have that apolitical structure where you give the person 10-year terms so that he's not tied and tethered to any one party or administration. Is the next guy, Paul, going to keep Kash Patel or see the precedent that was set here and do his own maneuver to bring in his own person? That to me is the more interesting question.
Yep.
Because you are really shattering a norm here. And I tell you, that norm is in place for a reason. Having 10-year terms for the FBI director, just like they had different terms for inspectors general, to keep them away from politics ensured something in the system. And I wonder what the next person does.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with the shattering of the norms. And I know you're going to stay on it. I mean, I don't know what the poly market says on Kash Patel, but I would definitely be taking the under on 10 years. That's for sure. Scott, you're doing awesome reporting. I can't wait to see what you'll break next. I hope folks will continue to track on everything you're doing. I think you are one of the most important reporters in America, and especially because you've been so focused on January 6th, which I think is such a historic and disgraceful and important event, not just to our politics, but to our national security and the soul of our country. So I think you've been so vigilant on this and so valuable. It's been a tremendous public service, and I'm grateful for that. I want to end with something good.
Something good, oh, something sweet. Feel the fire, feel the heat.
You talk about a lot of serious stuff, but you're also an inspiring guy. I know, your community where you came from is proud of you. So many folks have seen you as an example of what good journalism looks like. I'll start and then I'll come to you. My something good is kind of like the Scott MacFarlane of Christmas. NORAD. NORAD tracks Santa. Everyone has seen the North American Aerospace Defense Command is in Colorado. And here's the exciting part. They are recruiting volunteers to help with their annual Santa tracker on Christmas Eve. They need 1,000 volunteers to accept calls on December 24th. If you've never called, even if you don't have kids or you never had kids or you don't have kids anymore, call it, because it's pretty darn cool. And the website has gotten much more modern. I'm glad to see that NORAD hasn't gotten cut by Doge or anyone else. But the something good is NORAD and how they track on Santa and inspire, I think, the world, but also the fact that you can be a part of it. So look it up. I'll link to it in the show notes. We say look for the helpers. This is a small way folks can be a helper, but you can be a part of NORAD tracking on Santa and be like a Scott MacFarlane overseeing what's happening on the ground in Christmas. Scott, that's my something good. What have you got, sir? What's something good?
I like yours a lot. So my oldest son is 15 years old. You're never going to believe. He asked for Christmas for a CD player and some CDs. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? What God's name do you want to have a CD player and CDs? And he explained it to me that I think he wants something tactile. Music's really important to him. He wants something to touch, hold with music, and something to put up on the shelf or to show people. And I feel like it vindicates what you and I grew up with, where that was a thing. It wasn't just so much playing your music and enjoying it, but showing, feeling the music. And I think there's aspirations that we all can now have, that our kids, this next generation, for which we have so much cynicism, does see some of the virtue of what mom and dad did.
Love that, man. Did he request any bands in particular on CD?
Yes, and I don't know any of them. I never heard of freaking one of them. So I took him to one of those CD stores, the kind that pop up in old bookstores, and he's like, Dad, this is all too old.
Yeah.
It's like, they're making new CDs. They are making new CDs.
They
You
are.
go to Target, they're selling CDs, and it's probably not a very deep, list of artists that are doing it. But yeah, you could buy CDs, and because of this, yes, you could buy a CD player, which I thought was going to be a hard get too. But they're selling those again now.
I love that. I was explaining to my son that there was a point where I had a car radio, I don't know if you remember these, that had a cassette that plugged in and then fed to a CD player that was like on my console, right? I mean, all the ways we had to kind of rig our systems to be able to play CDs. And I mean, my mother had, I think, an 8-track player in her car. I don't know, but I love it, man. I think we need to get back to CD. That's something good. And I can tell, the way you're raising your family is something good. You've always been a grounded and important guy, and I think you're an inspiration to America. And I appreciate your tenacity, really, in all sincerity. I admire your work. I appreciate your work. And I'm so grateful you came on the show, man. Now that we're daily, I hope you'll join us again. Wishing you and your family a very happy holiday and continued bad luck to your Eagles.
Thank you. Call anytime. I'm happy to come back.
All right. Thank you, my friend. All right. The great Scott MacFarlane. There he is. Follow him everywhere. He's doing great work at CBS. Definitely follow him on social media. He's one of the few reasons that are still worth being on a place like X, because he's breaking news. He's keeping track of things that many other reporters aren't. He's the best kind of journalist, a true independent American. Follow him and follow us everywhere on all the social medias. Subscribe on YouTube if you're watching right now. Get the merch. Join our Patreon community. If you like this episode, throw in $5 and help us keep it coming. We're finishing a big week tomorrow with Governor-elect of New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, helicopter pilot and Navy vet. We're going to get into all the national security stuff, the latest on Hegseth, and we're going to talk Army-Navy. We had Governor Wes Moore for Army earlier. This week, we'll have Governor-elect Mikey Sherrill coming up. I was on News Nation with Connell McShane yesterday, MSNBC with Nicole Wallace. Those are linked on the show page and on our social. I'll be on CNN Out Front later with Aaron Burnett for the latest on the tanker and whatever else is happening. America's more divided than ever, but at Independent Americans, we're working to change that, bringing light to contrast to heat. So if you're among the 50% of Americans that are independent, this is your show. This independent movement is hope for the future. You see that in the reporting of Scott MacFarlane and so many other folks who've been guests on the show. Country over party, people over politics, light over heat. Our new movement is growing, and we're bringing hope because we need that hope. It's the oxygen of democracy. If you like this episode with Scott MacFarlane, please share it far and wide. Invite others to declare their independence. And stay vigilant, my friends, just like Scott MacFarlane. That is one vigilant dude, because eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And no, you're not alone in your vigilance. We're all vigilant, and we're all in this together. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. Thank you for tuning in to Independent Americans. Congratulations to the Orioles on Pete Alonso. I wanted him. You got him. It's going to be fun. But it's almost Friday. I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, stay vigilant, America.
Powered by Righteous Media.